Hello and welcome. This is the online supplement to the Introduction to Cartography course. And I'm going to go through a couple of slides that doesn't fit within the time of the normal lecture. So I wanted to walk you through the idea of geographic mapping in a few slides here. I never touched on what we really mean when we say cartography, and there are obviously, as in many cases, a lot of definitions. One such definition has been established by the International Cartographic Association, and it says that it's the art, science, and technology of making maps, together with the study of as scientific documents and works of art. In this context, may be regarded as including all types of maps, plans, charts, sections, three-dimensional models, and globes representing the Earth or any celestial body at any scale. So it's a very wide-ranging definition, and the interesting part is that it is defined as something that combines both science and art, and that is maybe the most compelling piece of this, is that people that have a very strong artistic sense and maybe not so technologically inclined or scientifically inclined can also do very well in cartography. But there is this need to understand some of that science in order to make a good map, and vice versa. Someone who's really well versed in the science but not has developed as such a strong sense of their artistic sides may also do good maps, but may not excel. And so that ultimate combination of an artistic sense, or at least acknowledging the artistic talents of your side, as well as your scientific talents, is the ultimate combination here. A much simpler one is the art, science, and technology of making and using map. Short and sweet. So why we talked about this in the classroom. Here is one quote that maps and other graphics comprise one of three major modes of communication, together with words and numbers. Because of this distinctive subject matter of geography, the language of maps is the distinctive language of geography. Hence, sophistication in map reading and composition and ability to translate between languages of maps, words, and numbers are fundamental to the study and practice of geography. So you want to use maps to find where things are located, look for spatial patterns, compare patterns across maps, and to gather information, organize information, and communicate information. So what is a map then? Well, the ICA again defines it as a symbolized representation of a geographical reality, representing selected features and characteristics resulting from the creative effort of its author's execution of choices that is designed for use when spatial relationships are of primary relevance. So you can look for more info on that. But the important thing is that it is a symbolized representation. We create artifacts, abstractions of reality, and put that in a very particular way onto a map. So it's again about the author's execution of choices. The author, the map creator, is the one with power here to choose what should be on and off the map. And it's designed in a particular way to be used for a particular purpose. Now that we have seen a couple of definitions here, we should be able to look at these four images and determine which of these is a map and which of them is not. Are they all four a map, or is none of them a map? Feel free to think a little bit and bring those thoughts to class next time. So when it comes to maps and map use, we know that they can be used for all kinds of good and bad. Oftentimes we divide maps into general reference maps, thematic maps, charts, and sometimes we also include concept maps or mind maps. And those would be more on the mental type of map side. We're not gonna talk much about that, if at all, but we're gonna deal with the tangible maps, and primarily general reference maps and thematic maps. And among the thematic maps, we will also see that we'll divide them into maps that have qualitative data and quantitative data. So that those two distinctions are sometimes very important for the style we choose and the design we choose. Sometimes we combine qualitative and quantitative information on the same map, and that's fine. We just have to be aware of what those different types of information allow us to do as cartographers. The quantitative can also be divided into univariate quantitative information and multivariate quantitative information. The general reference maps then, those are often the topographic maps that you may have used navigating on a hike or something like that. They emphasize the topography, the terrain, the transportation networks, any hydrography as in rivers, creeks, streams, lakes, water bodies, and also settlements where people live, streets, dense agglomerations of houses, cities, or individual houses in more sparsely populated areas. It really has a history of being used for ruling, controlling. So many topographic maps in the world are developed for those primary purposes of being able to manage and control property, land, and even national defense. So for example, the Swedish map system that I'm very familiar with has in their general reference standards particular definitions for what counts as a wetland and what counts as a swamp and so forth. And the specific designations of those separate where it's possible to cross with a tank or not. And the same thing goes for, dense forest and things like that. So it's kind of interesting use aspects that go into sometimes definitions that may seem like just vernacular types of categories, but no, they're often categorized. And the same thing with roads. Certain road types wouldn't be able to carry a tank, so they would have a particular type called maybe a secondary road or a tertiary road. But in reality, there might be other types of things that you can read out from it. So the reference maps are general purpose in the sense that you can use it for all kinds of things, like military uses, or just navigating to find your favorite fishing spot, or find the way to your uncle's house. So there are all kinds of uses for these maps, and hence the name, general reference. On the other hand, we have the thematic maps that are highly targeted for displaying information about a very particular subject. And so they're special purpose. They often focus on a single topic. They often include statistics in the form of graphs, visuals. And the example here is from a couple years back, which is still a relevant issue, the Syrian migration and people escaping out of conflict zones in the Middle East. And we will look at a number of different thematic maps, and you will get an opportunity to practice those different styles. Charts, finally, is a reserved term for a very particular type of navigation map. Early on, these were the explorer maps that allowed the early explorers to navigate across oceans and find their way. These times we still use the name charts for nautical charts, maps, and also for airborne traffic. So those would also typically be called charts. And this overlay here is an example of such an aviation chart that some of you probably recognize since you're aviation majors. To be honest, I don't have much of a clue of what those blow lines are, but what might be of interest is to see how certain types are emphasized or highlighted in this map and other things are not. So obviously those blue lines are important to the person in the aircraft, and certain things on the ground are more important, such as the yellow highly settled pieces, some major roads that are clearly visible from the air, whereas other things that may not be at all visible is also not important as a navigational feature, so they're left off the chart. So with those few examples, I'm going to walk through a very particular example and give you a sense of what the cartographic design process might look like. And this is the process that you will go through yourself during the course and in shorter instances as you produce small maps, but particularly in your final project, where you will go through step 1 through 5 as a way to demonstrate that you have learned something useful. So this map was, as I mentioned in class, I did a bike routes map during my first job, and the cover of that map is what you're seeing, and we're going to step through what it took to come up with that product. So in step 1, the first thing to think about is what the real world distribution looks like. So what is important in a bike route map? But obviously bike routes. So where are they located, and also what are the points of interest that would have anyone interested in biking around? So those two things, where people want to go and where those routes are that might be able to take them there. In this view of one of the maps, you can see that the bike routes, the green ones, and the points of interest, the magenta red colored ones, are the ones that really stand out. And that's exactly what we typically want to have happen in a map, that the most important things are the one that stands out, that you immediately notice in a map. And then thinking about the purpose and the audience. Who are the people who are going to look at this map? We had it targeted towards tourists in general, because points of interest could be interesting for anyone who visits a place, not just those who are on a bike. But certainly it was targeted toward bike tourists. So with those definitions and sort of prerequisites set, we moved on and started thinking about how do we get the data. We had existing databases of tourist destinations that we could draw from, so we just pulled that information from the tourism agencies, and then we combined that with general reference map data on roads, settlements, and so forth. So those two data sets were our primary starting points. And then we went about the actual design and construction of the map, and a lot of questions then to ask yourself. How will it be used? So we wanted it to be used by bikers, so as they're biking along, they could quickly get it out and figure, should I turn left or right here, or do I want to go this way or that way? Where would that take me? Certainly the spatial dimensions then became an important part. The size limitations, you don't want to have too big of a thing. You want to limit the cost for tourists so they will actually buy this thing. And there, basically this list is a lot of specific things to keep in mind. What are you going to put on the map? What are they going to look like? Will they be linear features? Will they be point features? How should we put them in so they can fit inside the mapped area? Do we have to change the scale? Are there technical limits? In our case, can we use full color print, or do we have to resort to some limited color or maybe even black and white print? Is there any temporal component of the data that is time sensitive? So some of these places, for example, are only open during the tourist season, a very short season during the summer. Do we need to take that into consideration, and so forth? So a lot of this, in our case, it was mostly about size, bringing down the cost, making sure that most important information is on the map. The selection piece was really important, and also to generalize some of the features so that it wasn't overly noisy, yet had all the information that people were looking for. The final step then, once we were done, we had it produced, printed, and everything, you do want to do some kind of evaluation. Sometimes it's not a formal one. In our case, it was a very informal one. It was judged by the sales, and it did sell a lot, got good reviews, and actually had to be reprinted, so it was a good success. But we never did a formal review, so we could have done some kind of survey, and certainly just looking at it right now, I feel that it could have been improved cartographically in many ways, but we may leave that to discussion further on. So the traditional view then, recapturing here, step 1 through 5, is mostly looked upon as a linear process, where the map is then the ultimate final step that may be improved, but usually from A through Z. That is traditional, but it's really changing when we look at current cartography. One key thing that is changing right now is map creators. Who are the map creators? And when I did this many years ago, it was still just a select few who had the resources and availability of those resources to produce a map like that. These days, map creators can be you. It could be almost anyone who has access to the internet and the many tools available to make maps actually from scratch. So we're seeing both trained professionals and amateurs doing maps today. We also see a trend of new types of maps that didn't exist before. A lot of animation, multimedia maps, and even augmented reality types of maps where you can see a virtual Pokemon hovering over the oval. It's a type of map type interface that we've never seen before. And then the changing use is certainly much more interactive, iterative, so you have a map, you use it, you add to it, and you use it again, and so forth. So there is a lot of co-authorship in today's map, the internet maps, where you can actually contribute information to, let's say, Google's maps. You can go in there and say, this is wrong, and this business has moved, and eventually that will pretty quickly make its way to the official map. So it's a lot more real-time mapping going on. Some other current trends. Geovisual analytics has become a big term lately. It's about analytics with geographic data and all kinds of tools being used to make information visible, not just spatial information, but anything is connected to that spatial information. The integration with geographic information systems is now more common than not. Cartography used to be a foundation for what we see in modern GIS. Now, GIS is cartography and a lot more things. There's a fair amount of interest still among cognitive issues, how people think about maps and how they navigate maps, what makes them effective, how do you reason with maps, and so forth. And there are also a lot of social and ethical issues with map. The critique of the objective map, as I mentioned, what is left off the map and on is an important social and ethical issue. And community maps, counter maps, things like that. And also privacy issues that have been really at the forefront of this revolution of being always visible and social and online. So for next time, with the in-class presentation and this online presentation, some of the things that you may want to think about is what are maps and what are the different types of maps? Can I recognize those different types of maps? Thematic and general reference maps. So I want you to, as soon as you get your atlas, look through it and identify at least one example of a thematic map and a general reference map covering the same area, and so you can look at what is the difference between them and similarities. And then in terms of course logistics, revisit the syllabus, obviously. Make sure you've completed the survey in Carmen, the Getting Acquainted survey, and the class note you took, and the conversations we had in class will certainly assist you with filling that out. So it should be an easy thing. And also, please don't forget to complete the background check forms before you go to lab on Wednesday or Friday. And that should be it. Thank you.